All right, and we are live. Hey, everyone, and welcome to our 10th episode of KC Reacts. I'm Kevin Hammer,
And I'm Chris Barrett.
and we also want to welcome you to our new channel. Now, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the new channel yet, please take time to do that. So, subscribe, hit that bell, and please do share. Once again, please subscribe, hit that bell, and please do share because we really want to make this channel something special. And I mean, especially given that this is our first stream to it, so we hope we have a lot of activity in the comments. Please don't be afraid to comment. We'd love the engagement. What do you have to say, Chris?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Guys, just so that you know, there are plans to expand to Rumble and Apple Podcasts at least. So we've got that in the works too. So if you're looking to, maybe have an audio only version of the podcast or something along those lines, we're getting ready to take care of that.
Yeah.
So YouTube is a great starting place, but we're expanding.
Absolutely, and we are definitely looking forward to that future. But right now, in the present, this stream is, as you can see, it's titled "A Queer Path to God." And I feel like the environment, the timing is perfect for this stream with everything going on. We just had Easter, obviously. God rest his soul. We had the passing of the Pope. And there's also though a lot of insanity happening around religion right now. And Chris and I share something. We share a lot in common, but one of the things we definitely share is a path of faith. For me, I have found myself drawn to the path of Christianity. I read my Bible every day. I actually have this Bible has a little plan in a calendar to read every day certain passages and process them, analyze them, and deeply consider them. So for me, the path has been, is Christian. And for Chris, he has actually had a very interesting path because he's on the Jewish path. So Chris, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And now that you brought your Bible, give me a second to bring out my Bible. So here we go, guys. So anyway, this is one, and this is actually one that I'm plan on giving to Kevin actually at some point in time, because I have my own copy that is newer and kind of nicer and all that type of stuff. But if you want uh, uh the Hebrew to English translations, there you go. So yeah. About me, the funny thing is, guys, like I have like a whole bunch of Jewish ancestry, like a bunch. I mean, I've done my family tree, but the funny thing is that some point in time, some of them decided to convert to Christianity. Well, before I was even really aware of some of this stuff, I was already drawn to Judaism in my 20s. I was living in St. Louis and I would go to synagogues as opposed to going to church, even though at the time I was supposedly a practicing Catholic. But I would go to synagogues instead. It just felt a little bit better. And then when I found out that, you know, uh, basically 25% of my family through my mother's lineage is Jewish, I was like, yeah, I guess maybe God was sort of saying something to me because I had gone down some bad paths while I was a supposed Christian, and I'll tell you what, Judaism has been quite a saving grace for me. It has, really strengthened my relationship with God. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. That's why I have a Christian name, Christopher, but I am actually Jewish.
Yeah. And being a friend to Chris right now as we're both on this journey has been amazing. Because I'm actually currently in the Old Testament, so obviously, I'm in Chris's territory right there. So that's been some interesting conversations. I'm looking forward to getting to the New Testament. I really am, but right now I'm in the Old Testament. Um, so yeah, as we said, Chris and I are both on a path, our own path to God, our own path of faith. Now, there are many people who struggle with such a path, right? But some individuals, that path doesn't lead to God. It actually leads to themselves. It leads to a worshiping of what I'm going to straight up say is false idols, especially when it is the worshiping of the self, the worshiping of the flesh, the worshiping of identity, such as sexual orientation or gender identity, trans identity, and those are the individuals that we're here to discuss this evening. We are going to be focusing on individuals. Some of them, well, most of them, they're religious leaders. We have one drag queen who does a poetry reading at a church service, of course. But the majority of these clips are actually supposed, religious leaders, and how they are incorporating, or more accurately, inserting, forcing in, queer ideology, right? That quote unquote queer ideology, hence a queer path to God. So with that, we are actually going to start. Are you all set, Chris?
I think I'm ready.
All right, now everyone, remember, comment as we go, because we would love to get your input in regards to these individuals and how do you feel? Are they remaining true to the faith? We're going to go back and forth a little bit between Christianity and Judaism.
Judaism. Yep.
Judaism. But now some people might think, why didn't we, select Islam? And I actually, out of curiosity, I looked up Islam and LGBT, and obviously, I think the world knows for the most part how that goes. And I found one man who was a openly gay imam, and yeah, unfortunately, God rest his soul, he was assassinated by the religion of peace. So unfortunately, so in Chris and I, we have these paths that we're on, which honestly, at the end of the day, made it feel all the more appropriate that we focus on Christianity and Judaism. So with that, without further delay, we're going to get to our first clip. So our first clip is of one Rev. Andy Oliver. He is of the Allendale United Methodist Church in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now, this is a quick clip, but there's a lot in it to discuss.
Good morning. Welcome to worship. My name is Andy. My pronouns are he, him, his. It is great to be with you on this New Year's Eve Sunday, but more importantly here, it's Drag Queen Sunday. And we are so thankful for the drag queens that are here. Frida, that was...
All right. So here's what we got going on this, right? So of course we got the pronouns, and I actually looked him up. I Googled him, and the pronouns are right there in the bio, of course. And it's he, him, his. Then of course his stole, so the scarf-like garment that they wear, that he's wearing, is the pride colors and the power fist with different skin tones on it. So of course he's got that to add. And then Drag Queen Sunday. Really? Drag Queen Sunday. Chris, what's your take on that?
Well, obviously, he starts off with the pronouns, as you said, and they kind of give them away. He's obviously captured by gender ideology. So, I mean, no normal person who isn't captured by gender ideology would ever announce their pronouns. You know, because it's obvious whether you're a man or a woman. You shouldn't have to do that. At least for 99.9% of people out there. Maybe there's an exception in that 0.01%. Um, the I always suspect, because he's obviously captured by gender ideology, I always suspect that the reason drag is pushed upon people is because it is kind of like a gateway drug, so to speak, into gender
Oh,
ideology. Because
absolutely.
yeah, so it's always showing, men dressing as women or women dressing as men. So it's kind of blending that stuff together. And the funny thing is with these people, like this reverend, um, no other part of the gay community is celebrated like drag queens. And I think that
Mhm.
that says a lot. You don't see anything about the gay firefighters, gay cops, gay lawyers, gay doctors, or anything like that. It is drag queens,
Uh-huh. And
and that says something to me that this guy is like really caught up in the LGBTQ, and that mm, that's a non-starter for me.
exactly. And personally, when you're in a house of God, I think really the only identity that you're focused on is the fact that you're a child of God, right? That is the only. So all this, alphabet soup and all that stuff here is just absolute insanity. So we're gonna go from this quick clip, and we're gonna, dip our toe in Chris's waters, and we're gonna listen to a video by one Rabbi Josh. And folks, trust me, hang in there. So here we go with Rabbi Josh.
Joyful Jewish queer news. Today, our fourth graders visited one of our local mikvahs. It's at an Orthodox synagogue that's just so lovely. And they got to see their first gender barrier called a mechitza, which separates men and women in a very cis-normative way in the mostly Orthodox Jewish world. Not in every Orthodox synagogue, and not all Orthodox Jews believe this. However, our kids were a little surprised at seeing this for the first time, and our fourth graders asked, where do non-binary people sit? This is the question. That's what my classmates and colleagues and I are often talking about when it comes to a mechitza, and it honestly makes me very uncomfortable for that very reason. And also for, in many communities, some misogynistic and sexist things in which only cisgender men can do certain things. But y'all, as the teacher said, Rabbi Ariel Tovlev, the kids are all right.
So, Chris, I'm going to throw that to you first because I need to know, how do you feel about, how did he put it? He's got some joyful Jewish queer news. How how
Hmm.
how how did that make you feel? Do you feel joyful and queer and Jewish?
No. Um, I'll just put it this way. Clearly these kids I mean, a fourth grader, I think that's what he said. Fourth grader is
Yeah.
asking about, what where non-binary people are going to sit in an Orthodox synagogue where, things are divided up between men and women. Clearly these kids have already been brainwashed thanks to Rabbi Josh and his colleagues. And, I mean, the thing is, it's like, while I personally don't think that men and women really truly need to be separated anymore, I mean, I want to say to this guy, it's like, man, if you hate Judaism so much, become an atheist or something, because you clearly don't like your religion. Because the separation of the sexes is something that is certainly in the Bible. I'm not saying that I necessarily support it, because I think that, things have evolved over time, and, it's not necessary. But the thing is he's obviously a part of Reform Judaism. And Reform Judaism is very interesting because it is, at least to me, because it is or was my introduction to Judaism. When was talking about the fact that I used to go to synagogues and that sort of thing, what I did is I went to Reformed synagogues. Now, largely it was because at the time they were cool with the gays. None of this trans, queer, whatever type of crap actually existed at that time. But I started going to Reformed synagogue here in Kansas City, and sure enough, the trans people and everything like that showed up. And I mean, I'm not saying that they need to be cut off from God, but they talked about it in a very affirming sort of way, and that kind of bothered me because it's
And we
like,
have a clip coming up that's going to demonstrate that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we have, as you've seen, Chris, the next clip that deals with a rabbi is also from one of those synagogues.
right.
So,
Yeah, and so I mean they're talking about it in a very affirming way that kind of bothers me because it's kind of like affirming a mental illness, you
mhm.
know? And to me that's not cool. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just the fact that, part of me wants to believe that he's lying, that you don't have a fourth grader actually saying, where do the non-binary people sit? But I can also believe it because you can tell this is an individual who has spent some time indoctrinating children. So
Mm-hmm.
these children, I'm gonna guess at least they were pushed to ask that question because I've never in my life. I mean, come on. These fourth graders saw this that where do non-binary people sit? Come on now. As far as separation of the sexes, at least in Christianity, that's not really something that I've had any experience with. But I also understand where the sentiment comes from. I can understand that it comes from a negative place, but I can also understand where it comes from a positive place. Because even in Christianity, you have women's church groups and organizations, and you have men's groups as well. Just because those bonds of sisterhood and brotherhood are very important, which is another target for the trans agenda, right? The gender ideology are those brotherhoods and sisterhoods, whether they be religious or college related or in general. Obviously, Boy Scouts is one of the best examples that we had in the culture here in America. So yeah, there's definitely that targeting going on. But with that, we are going to move forward into more insanity because we're going to touch on a drag queen Bible story hour. Yeah, I know, right? You thought drag queen story hours were bad. Now we're getting into a whole nother level of that territory right there. So here we go, and just watch this clip in general. Watch the attire. Watch pay close attention to the individual speaking, just how they're dressed. It is absolute insanity.
We're holding a drag queen Bible story hour.
Reverend Victor Floyd says it's a first for Calvary Presbyterian Church. They've held a pre-Pride prayer service before, but this is something new.
We're hoping to offer a little balance to all of the hateful rhetoric that's out in the country, and especially coming from churches and from politicians who are using churches and using trans people and drag queens as their props.
Supporters came early and sat.
My name is Joanne Fabrics. Also, I'm Pastor Sam Lundquist at St. John's Presbyterian Church.
And they listened to the message.
And he led his flock into the wilderness.
And there was song.
And thou, my true word.
Pride Month especially is extremely important these days because so many of us come up in shame, and that's why we need pride.
All right. So a few points right off the bat for me. All right. First of all, once again, the stole that we see this gentleman wearing, I hesitate and strain to call him a religious leader, in any way, is the trans flag, right? So right there, the trans flag, and to be honest, I think that's actually very symbolic because he's transitioning faith into something horrific. He's transitioning that church into something horrific, right? So, I just touched on that a little bit. Then reading to children, we obviously have, the drag queen reading to children, which we see as the standard thing being pushed by the trans cult, the gender ideology cult. So right there, we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. But just at the end there, that's why we need pride. We need a sin in church. Now, this is one of the things where I really have come to understand that pride comes before the fall. When you look at any situation where true pride, like pride, is really put into something in a fashion where it consumes you and you worship it, right? Like, I'm not talking pride where, you pass a test, right? And you're proud of yourself for that accomplishment or passing a course or something, right? I'm talking about where you pride in something like an identity where you hold that even above God. And that is what these individuals do, right? They hold it even above God. That's very clear here. And honestly, at least in my journey, as I walk my path in Christianity, what I'm coming to understand, and speaking for myself here, is that faith should be something that's experienced in a humble fashion with great humility. And I don't see any of that taking place here. Chris, what you have to say?
Well, that is actually a good point. I mean, they're wearing their flashy costumes and everything and trying to draw attention to themselves. So, that's kind of interesting. But I noticed that this so-called reverend, and I'm going to call him so-called because I can't imagine that he's really a great representative of Christianity. But he's wearing trans colors, and I think that that's really interesting. Maybe the Presbyterian Church has a different I don't know, calendar for what colors they wear during the year than the Catholic Church does. But I don't recall the Catholic Church, which is one of the original Christian churches, actually having trans pride colors as like an official stole that you would wear. Just a thought. Um, Anyway, and then the other thing is the drag queen that came up, is obviously a perpetual victim. It's like, pride is not important anymore. We as gay people have, the right to marry. We have equal protection in the workplace. Sodomy laws have been repealed across the country. It's like we are fine. Pride is completely pointless anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned, obviously he's wearing the trans colors there. Now, folks, please keep watching because later we have a clip where a woman describes Jesus as a trans man. So just wait until we get to that point. I do want to go to the comments quick before we move on to our next clip. Daniel says, you are using trans and drag queens as props? TF? Question mark? Yeah. Yep. As not just as props, but as idols of worship. Okay. So that we're not just talking about props, we're talking about idols of worship. And you'll see that in an even more outlandish clip that's coming up very soon.
Yeah.
Vinny says, hey guys, hey Vinny, thank you for supporting our new channel. Please, Vinny, share like you always do. And we can't wait to have you on as a guest someday, Vinny, because you have been with us there since pretty much our first few episodes. So thank you so much for that, Vinny. You're awesome. So with that, though, we are going to move on to a video which, ladies and gentlemen, this includes some profanity. We are going to listen to Drag Queen SunShine Rayne read poetry at a Lutheran Church service. So yes, that's Drag Queen SunShine Rayne. and this is his poetry. All right, this is his poetry.
My name is Sunshine Rainbow. My pronouns are she, her, they, them, queen, and goddess. I'm an artist, a poet, and activist, a drag queen, and I'm sick and tired. I'm going to recite some poems. That's small poems, so they're all together. This one is called I Am Somebody. I am somebody, I may be black, I may be white, but guess what? I am somebody. I am somebody, I may be rich, I may be poor, but guess what? I am somebody. I am somebody, I may be an immigrant, I may be a citizen, but guess what? I am somebody. I am somebody, I may be a man, which I ain't, I may be a woman, which I am, but guess what? I am somebody. I am somebody, I may be straight, which I ain't, because I tried that shit once and it didn't work out. I may be gay, which I am, but guess what? I am somebody. And y'all are somebody, and together we are succeeding in changing this fucked up world. That's that piece. That you matter, and fuck this world. We're going to be ourselves, regardless of how this world sees us. We're going to be ourselves. We've always existed, and we're not going anywhere. If you like my poetry, and you want to see more of it, or you want to book me to perform either poetry or drag, or you want to buy my art, you can follow me at Sunny Ray Create.
All right. So, damn, as the left is fond of saying, there's a lot to unpack here. My boy, you am unhealthy. All right, you might mentally ill. All right, you am mentally unstable. You might as well put that in there in your description. But let's just go through that, right? Goddess, right? So this individual in a house of God refers to himself as a god, specifically a goddess, which is another level added to that crazy, but a god, right? All right. And the profanity, and then F this world. Yeah, there's a very clear Christian message for you, huh? F this world. And as much as I'm disgusted by this individual, I have to say what concerns me more is whoever sought out this individual and brought him into a house of God to speak, because they opened the door for the fox into the henhouse, right? They opened the door for the evil, right? That is what they did. So this individual is the insane individual that he is, right? I have more questions for the people that thought that this is what they should bring into their church. That's where I have more questions. Chris, I'm going to throw it to you.
Sure. I noticed the cussing during the church service, which I thought was kind of interesting in the sense that it shows the actual disrespect of this person for the actual church. But I'm guessing this is a woke church, so they probably ate it up and thought it was great. But still, I'm not going to go before God in a house of worship and start using words like that. That's just not something that I'm going to do. So it kind of tells you where this person's coming from. And then I also find it very interesting that this person promotes themselves for financial gain. It's like, book me for a drag show, book me for my poetry, whatever the hell that was. Um, and I'm just kind of left wondering, it's like, these trans queer people, and this dude definitely fits into it. These trans queer people, isn't the grift and the money making kind of what this is all about? I mean, when we look at like the medical industry that is pushing this trans shit, especially on kids, what they're doing is they're just broadening their financial horizons. So there is like so much money behind this stuff. And that's what people need to understand. It's like, this is not some sort of grassroots movement or anything like that. This is not some sort of like, oh, just a bunch of poor people or whatever, or poor trans people decided to get together and make a difference. No, that's not what's going on, guys. What is going
Mhm.
on is they are coming for your kids and they are there to make money.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's definitely a gamut there, and it's about earning money. Absolutely. I do, before we go to the next clip, I do want to go to the comments quick. Daniel says, holds up cross, the power of Christ compels you. And here's the thing. If Christ was in that church, Christ would be tipping tables and creating a whip to go after this individual. That's what I believe. Because this right here, I mean, for this individual, like I said, and I will repeat myself, for this man to say, I am a goddess in a house of God, you're telling me Jesus would support that? Get out of here. I don't want to hear that from anyone trying to tell me that is something that Jesus would support. Show me in any fashion where Jesus would support that. Vinny says that yes, he has shared with friends on Instagram and in groups on Facebook. So thank you so much, Vinny. Once again,
Thanks,
you
Vinny.
are amazing. And he also says, Vinny says that the look on their faces will be priceless if God appears on earth tomorrow. You best believe it. Yeah. And Vinny also says the medical industry cares about their own pockets before they care about the people. And I think I feel like even regardless of political affiliation and religious affiliation, I think many of us can agree on that in the culture
I
to
agree.
one degree or another, to one extent or another. I think we can all come to agreement on
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
I thank Vinny for saying that because I mean that just kind of backs up what I was trying to say. It's like ultimately when it gets down to especially the medical side of the stuff, it's all about money. But I
Hmm.
think that it's all about the grifter money too, and this is a grifter, you know.
Yep. Now we're gonna head back to Chris's territory. We're getting to Judaism again, and forgive me for butchering this. And I know Chris is still on his journey. So when it comes to Hebrew and pronunciation, I know Chris is still on his journey. So I'm not putting any pressure there. I know I'm gonna butcher it worse than anyone though. So here we have Rabbi Yeel Werber from the Beat Simchat Torah congregation, which is a reformed synagogue, right, Chris? It's one of those reformed
Yeah,
groups.
it's reform. I looked them up actually, and you're right. You did mispronounce it, and that's okay because I probably would have butchered it myself. Um, but yeah, they are a reform congregation.
So with that, here we're gonna watch a clip where this rabbi, quote unquote, she discusses how Jacob is probably the most queer figure in the Bible. Yeah, get ready for this one, folks. Let's dive in.
Marcus Hawley and I recently had a discussion about Jacob, and Marcus shared his theory that Jacob is one of the queerest characters in the Torah. You might have even said the queerest character in the Torah. Exactly, okay. So I'm going to let Marcus give their own Torah on this subject, which is probably better than mine, but I can see it. Because of this parsha, I can see it. Starting here, Jacob becomes a ger, a stranger, an outsider. And really, what could be another word for somebody like that but queer? Rashi even says, why does the text need to tell us he went out from Beersheba? That's how it starts. It says, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheba leCharan. It could have said, and Jacob went to Haran. It doesn't need to say where he came out from. But Rashi says, no. This is to let us know that the departure, the leaving, makes an impression. And he says it's similar to Ruth, in the case of Ruth, in the book of Ruth, who also left her home and became a ger. In some ways, she's the quintessential ger. And she becomes a ger moving to the land of Naomi. So it's nothing new that queerness and otherness has been weaponized. But recently, one of the ways that I found the election cycle here to be the most horrifying and distressing to watch was one of the major ads that the Trump campaign ran that said, Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you. You all probably saw it. It was, I'm sure, equally as horrifying to you. And in it, he did as so many ill-intentioned people have done before him, placing those who identify as other, as gender nonconforming, or as simply different from what Trump or others can understand, placing them as the enemy, something to be feared. It was both disgusting and divisive. So to respond to that, I want to quote from some modern Torah of our time, from Queer Eye, the Netflix reboot.
All right, Chris, I am going to throw it to you first because I can't wait to hear how your interpretation of how the modern Torah is queer eye for the straight guy. Well, queer eye. I'm sorry, the original was queer eye for the straight guy. But before I do that, I do want to mention, yes, when I started the clip, I said Jacob from the Bible. Obviously, as a Christian, I'm referencing Old Testament. In this context, it's referencing the Torah. I just wanted to correct, to clarify
you're
that.
actually,
Yeah, because for me as a Christian, it is the Bible, right? The Old Testament. But anyways,
Yeah,
Chris, I'm gonna throw it to
yeah.
you. Is Queer Eye the modern Torah?
I kind of don't think so.
And how queer was Jacob?
All right, so she calls Jacob queer just because he was an outsider. Okay. I I'm not sure how that makes him queer, but then again, I think that shows how meaningless that word has become. Remember, guys, the LGBTQ. Well, the Q is queer. And basically, anybody can be queer by just being different. So, it's like that's why people probably like Kevin and I, absolutely reject the LGBTQ because it's diluting who we are. Kevin is a homosexual. I'm a homosexual. It's just, who we are. And being aligned with these other groups and stuff like that, especially the freaking T and the Q, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with us. So I mean, it just shows. But to recap, it just shows how meaningless that word is. It's like, oh, so you can be queer just because you're an outsider. The other thing is it's kind of funny to see this leftist getting really political in a house of worship. Now, had this been flipped and this was some sort of right wing preacher or rabbi preaching, they'd be screeching about how it's illegal, because it is illegal for pastors to call upon their congregations to vote one way or another. Now, technically, she is doing it after the fact. I mean, because it is December 6th when she made her
Yeah,
pronouncement.
but still, she's guiding them for the future. She's letting them know what to do in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so they would screech about a right wing pastor or rabbi doing this sort of thing, but here she is doing it unapologetically.
Absolutely, Chris. And I feel like in this context, I feel like we've had this discussion before, Chris, about how one thing I've noticed, and I discussed it with you, is how the LGBTQ blah 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 has taken an approach to separate terms and then conflate them, right? Like,
Right.
and we're gonna touch on this in a future stream. Like, for example, right? They would say for gender, there's a difference between gender and sex, right? They used to say gender was between the ears, sex was between the legs, right? But that's changing, because if they truly believe that, then why do they want IDs? I mean, my ID says sex on it, not gender. So in New York State, at least, so why do you, like, if you honestly believe that and you were a trans woman, you'd be fine with your ID still saying your sex, which is male. And recently in the UK, we saw this a lot too. There are many examples of trans activists now conflating the two, saying they not only is their gender woman, but they are also female. And I think that was the goal all along. And I think that's what she's trying to do here. She's trying to use the word queer in both contexts at the same time to bring them together and make them indistinguishable, right? She's trying to say queer are different, queer also trans, all this stuff. So let's just put it together. At least that's how I'm reading it. That's what I'm feeling coming from her right now. And while I'm not sure, I'm curious as to the yarmulke there, if it's rainbow as well, because when she moves a little bit, it looks like it might actually be the pride flag.
Well, I'll tell you what. The funny thing is there is no requirement for women to wear yarmulkes, so I'm not really quite sure why she's even doing that. But okay.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into this a little bit more once we finish up with these clips, because we have 2 more clips ahead of us, and it doesn't get any better. It really doesn't. All right. So now we're gonna backtrack a little bit to a former episode where we had this individual. Her name is Pastor Julie Payne Britton. Now, she was speaking before the Worcester, Massachusetts City Council when they voted about, I believe it was making their city a trans sanctuary or something along those lines. And this woman, this quote unquote pastor, came up, and she spoke her view about Jesus. And it was pure insanity. And honestly, as much insanity as we've seen tonight, this woman, in my opinion, she's at the top of this. And I mean, the blasphemy here, just like, I mean, oh, let's just dive into it, because trust me, this is nuts.
Good evening. My name is Pastor Julie Payne Britton. I use the pronoun she and her, and I am disabled cisgender lesbian. My wife and I moved here 2.5 years ago, and we live in West Tatnock in Worcester. I am also the associate pastor of Hadwin Park Congregational Church in Worcester, which is an open and affirming UCC church. I am here, people here. The Jesus I know would be dressed in full drag and serving face, or handsome as a trans man, or wrapped in the garb of a non-binary person who knows one gender is way too small to capture their gloriousness. The Jesus I know would be at this mic with a trembling voice and a shaking body and tears that will not be held back, crying, "Make this city safe for my child."
Can you wrap up, please?
In the name of Jesus, I thank you.
In the name of Jesus. So in this, you describe Jesus as a drag queen, as a trans man, and as non-binary. And disgusting enough. Now, I feel like it's all the more appropriate that she didn't just give the pronoun, she also labeled being, having disability, having a disability. I think the one of the mind is the strongest here. I will admit, this individual is one of the more disturbing and, in my opinion, actually evil examples of the insertion of this queer ideology, trans ideology into religion. This terrifies me. This actually terrifies me. And I pray to God that Jesus leads anyone attending this church away from that church. I really do pray for that, because that church is nothing but a building full of lost souls. And my heart actually goes out to them. This woman enrages me, but those that follow her, my heart goes out to them, and I pray for them, and I even pray for her. But still, it's just absolute insanity. Chris, what's your take on this?
Well, I always have to laugh at these people to a certain degree, because aren't they always disabled? It just seems to be a thing. And I'm not making fun of disabled people, but they always seem to have some sort of disability. So I'm imagining a lot of them are on like some sort of welfare or something. But the Jesus she believes in is not biblical at all. Here's the thing. I understand there's disagreements among Christians and Jews over homosexuality or something like that, and a lot of it has to do with like particular interpretations and that sort of thing. That's all fine and good. We'll get that figured out one day, or maybe never, or whatever. I don't really care at this point, but I think that, if you look at the New Testament, which, guys, I'm very well versed in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament, um, there is no way that Jesus would appear as a drag queen. There's no way that Jesus would call himself non-binary. There is no way that Jesus would even stand up there, as she said, trembling and shaking before them. Jesus was a very, very confident man,
Hmm.
you know? And so to even suggest that he would be such a freaking wimp, that alone is insulting, not
Mm.
to even, talk about the rest of the stuff. So, I
And
mean, everything that she had to say, if I was a Christian, would be utterly, utterly, utterly offensive.
hmm and trust me, as a man following, following path into Christianity, and I'm reading the Bible, I I just want to replay that last part because I swear for me, I actually see the devil in her when she says that last part there in when she says in Jesus' name. Oh, sorry. Like to me,
Make this city safe for my child.
Can you wrap up, please?
In the name of Jesus, I thank you.
all right. You see that smirk in those eyes?
Hmm.
To
Oh
me,
yeah, I
like I
noticed that
said,
too.
some people would be like, "Oh, you're reading into, no." To me, just look at that. Look at that smile. Oh, right there. It's
Yeah,
just like
it's a definite smirk, and I'll agree with you, Kevin. I mean, I am a definite believer
it,
in the power of evil, and I think that it has her captured. You know,
absolutely.
And I mean, just that look on her face is actually almost psychotic looking, really, because it's like they're asking you to wrap up. I mean, a normal person, and I've been before city councils and state legislatures and stuff like that, and I've been asked to wrap up. You get kind of nervous a little bit because it's like, "Oh, I got to find out how to condense everything that I really wanted to say into just a couple sentences because otherwise you're going to cut my mic."
Mm,
She doesn't do that. She gets this big evil grin on her face.
mm-hmm. That you see right there, and then turns her eyes. And to be honest, honey, Jesus would be flipping that podium and probably turning that mic into a whip. All right there, because of how. With that, though, I do want us to get to the comments quick before we get to the last clip, just because we do have some activity in the comments. So let's go there quick. Thank you all who are commenting. Greatly appreciated. Let me go down here. All right, so this is actually in regards to the last clip, where when we were talking about the woman wearing the yarmulke, Vinny said she's non-binary, Chris. So we will follow both gender norms, like wearing a yarmulke. That was a good one, Vinny.
I guess that's what it is, Benny. I guess that's what it is, man.
And Daniel says, "That's not Jesus you were speaking of, honey." I couldn't agree more, Daniel. Vinny then says, "The panel guy saying, 'Can you wrap it up, please?'" Yeah, that's funny. Probably because he actually is a Christian, possibly, and he just is having trouble stomaching the evil that's before him.
Well, like I said, Kevin, I mean, when you're in that situation, and I've been in that situation, and somebody is like, "Oh, your time is up," you don't sit there and like turn around and give this like freaking devilish smile. You get kind of nervous because you're trying to sum up everything that you want to say. But my God, she is like so proud of herself. It's disgusting.
hmm And Daniel's last comment in this clip is, I definitely saw that smirk, the demon inside her coming out to outwardly show itself. I couldn't agree more, Daniel. I full-heartedly agree with you on that. And Vinny looks like he might have a potential guest for us in the future. So, Vinny, I look forward to discussing that with you at a later date for sure. With that, we're going to move to our last clip, because one of the things that really is a focus for me, and we'll play the clip and then I'll go into it, is making idols of things in a place of God, on the property of a place of God. I really can't stand it. To me, anything that does that is not something I would ever want to see in a church that I attend. So with that, we are going to watch a pride flag raising at a church, and then we're going to get more into that topic right there.
Top story: a flag full of colors went up the pole at Trinity Episcopal Church on Sunday morning. After the church's Sunday service, the priest and several church members went out to raise the pride flag. Here, both members of the LGBTQ plus community and churchgoers stood together as the flag went up. The priest says raising the rainbow colors is to acknowledge the members of the LGBTQ plus community. And she says it is something that not every church may do, but that at Trinity they have for the past few years.
But they love the parts of our congregation who are saying this is important to those who are wondering about themselves as a person and who they love.
It makes me feel very, very happy that we're showing everybody that we're very inclusive and that this is a safe space to come to.
Also in Watertown for Pride Month, Watertown Pride 2024 kicking off in 2 weeks on Friday, June 14th.
All right, that's not about a safe space. That's about a corrupt and evil place. And okay, Lord, I'm trying not to be petty there, but all I see is a sofa pattern right there. Anyways, I'm trying not to. I know. All went there. I apologize. All right. Ooh, be better than the crazy. All right. But I just thought of my grandmother. Now, her couch more specifically. Anyways, so
Make sure you make that clear, Kevin.
I know, her couch. Anyways, okay. So the reason, first of all, you see the pride flag being raised with the American flag, which in and of itself is something that honestly I want no part of. It does disgust me. I am a patriotic man. I love my country. I am an American before I am most other things, right? Before that, of course, I'm a man of God. I'm a man of family, committed to my loved ones. But then I'm a man of my country. Before I am a homosexual, before I am anything else, I am most assuredly a patriot. So when I see any kind of flag raised with the American flag, it honestly, I BLM, whatever it may be, it honestly, it repulses me. So there's that. Now, raising that on religious grounds, right, on the grounds of a church, or bringing a pride flag into a church. When I was doing this research, I found churches decked out, and I wanted to keep our clips as short as possible, but I found churches decked out in pride flags, right? The podium had pride flags thrown over them, the progress flag, trans flags, all this stuff. This is bringing idols into a place that's supposed to be a place of God and worshiping them instead of God. And that just sickens me so much that I can promise you, if I were to ever go to a church that had a BLM flag, a pride flag, any kind of other flag, any kind of flag like that, inside any kind of poster like that, I would not be staying. I'd be walking right out. And this is where I differ a little bit, probably even from other conservatives. While I am unapologetically patriotic, and Chris and I have had this conversation, I am unapologetically patriotic. I vote America first. I believe our politicians should be putting Americans first. I do believe that in a place of worship, I actually don't even want a nation's flag. And the reason why is because God is above all nations. So for me, I wouldn't even want the American flag at my place of worship. I know that that's going to be a strain for a lot of people. It's just like I said, I believe that God is above nation as well as all those other identities that they're trying to cram here into a house of God. Chris, what's your take?
Well, Kevin, as far as the thing about like the American flag flying over a church or something like that, yeah, I mean, I don't take it to the level that you do, but I understand where you're coming from. I think it's very fair. I mean, I think that as far as that sort of thing is concerned, it's like, hmm, I can see a church or a synagogue wanting to become, a part of the community, and raising the American flag or a state flag or something like that might help with that. So, I mean, I sort of get that, but I also get your point of view. Now, here's the main thing as far as the this cast of clowns is concerned. Um, LGBTQ, I want to make this clear for everyone. LGBTQ is not the same as gay and lesbian. And let me explain why. Gay and lesbian is a sexual orientation. It's just something that you're born with or whatever. I mean, science hasn't seemed to have quite figured out why some people are this way or the other. Um, but at least to me, it feels like I was born into it. It wasn't something that I was convinced of for by some other influence. LGBTQ is a political movement, guys. It's not the same as gay and lesbian. Now, yes, there was a gay and lesbian pride flag. It's the rainbow flag that you're all familiar with. But that flag, if you notice, has pretty much gone away. It's been replaced by the progress flag, which is, representative of the LGBTQ movement. The gay movement has pretty much gone away because we got all the rights that we wanted. So there's no reason for it. Um, but the thing is like because the progress pride flag, the one that includes the chevron on it, just so everybody's following along, the one that includes the chevron on it and has the pink and the blue and the white and the black and the brown and all that type of stuff. I mean, that is probably even more of a political flag than the original pride flag ever was, meaning the rainbow colored one and nothing else on it. Now, so I would say to this pastor, um, why not raise a flag with communist symbolism to make sure that your communist members felt
Oh, I'm
included?
sure some do.
Oh yeah, but I bet you anything, most of them wouldn't be brave enough to
Yeah.
do something like that. And but my point is that I'm not equating the LGBTQ necessarily to communism, though I think there's a lot of similarities. But I am just saying that it is a political flag, and that's associated with a particular political movement that is not representative of the community as a whole, meaning like a whole city or a whole state or a whole country. It's pandering to a very small amount of people. So that's why I liken it to, hey, why not raise a communist flag? I kind of see it as the same thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned like politics because let's face it. I mean, one thing I remember when I was on the left is that was ingrained into our minds when you're on the left is your identity is politics, right? Your identity is political, right? You can't exist as LGBTQ whatever without being political because your existence is political. You can't be black or Asian or Hispanic without being political because your existence is political, right? Everything is that. Now what's interesting though is because the left often tries to talk about the separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution anywhere to be found, by the way. It is not. You're talking about a letter by Benjamin Franklin referencing the separations, in referencing that there will be no national church, by the way, not that there's going a separation of church and state, that people should never insert their faith into how they proceed politically. So yeah, the Constitution has no separation of church and state. However, in places of God, it's clear that Jesus actually doesn't want politics in a place of God. I mean, Jesus actually said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. And it's attributed to Jesus. And that is, to me at least, that's a clear statement that there is that separation, at least in a house of God. You shouldn't be focusing on politics. You should be focusing on your relationship with God. But that's my personal opinion, and it's also my personal opinion across the board, because I know there are obviously, as Chris you touched on, people that would challenge us about the fact that we are both homosexual men speaking to our relationship with God. But that's the thing, it's just that it's our relationship with God. I don't get out there and preach. That's not something that I am a fan of doing, because for me, and this is the first stream you'll ever find me really talking in depth on about this topic, my relationship with God is something deeply personal. And as I read this Bible, right, as I read this Bible and my journey and my relationship with God, that is something that is also deeply personal. And it's not something that I'm debating with another person or anything like that, because that's the journey I'm on. I'm asking God to guide me specifically. So yeah, I just like this, to get back to that though, the false idol worshiping, the stuff that we see, and I just see lost souls. Because one of my favorite sayings is every man worships at an altar. What that altar is what's different and what determines their character and their soul. And that's why I believe that God implanted in us a desire to seek him out without question. Now that desire to seek him out can get confused by the world around us, and we can end up actually worshiping politics, identity, as we see what's happening here by this insertion of queer ideology into these churches, right? These are people who are worshiping identity. They are worshiping at the altar of identity, certainly not the altar of God.
No. Yeah, no, you said that well. I'm really not sure that I have that much to add, honestly. Other than, you're right. These are, I mean, really, when it gets down to it, blasphemous preachers and rabbis that we've been looking at. And then the people that allowed the drag queen, Sunshine Rainbow to come up. I mean, I just, it's like, I don't understand the point of it, except that they're trying to get a political point across. And that's why I finally, here at the end, brought up the fact that LGBTQ plus is not the same as gay or lesbian. It just simply isn't. It is a political movement. And, because there's a lot, guys, there's a lot of gay people out there who absolutely have divorced themselves, and I'm one of them. Kevin's one of them, who have divorced themselves from the whole trans ideology altogether. Why? Well, it just makes sense because what on earth does gender identity have to do with sexual orientation? It has very little to do with it, and but the left, and it is their fault, the left, the Democrats, guys, I'm just going to go right ahead and say it. The Democrats have made that, something that we must accept, that trans and gay and bi and queer and intersex and asexual are all the same thing. That's not true, guys. That is absolutely not true. And the only gay people that buy into that are just the ones who are stupid enough to actually sit there and think that, yeah, there might be some similarity between us.
No.
And I think that you have to be a freaking idiot as a gay person to even buy into any of that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I am not, we're not suffering from some dysphoria that takes us away from our bodies, that God created them, right? That's not our experiences as homosexuals. I do want to go to the comments quick because there are some interesting comments. We'll bring that into the conversation. We have Smarty Tan, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I feel like I always butcher that. Smarty Tan.
Yeah, that's someone very close to me.
Yeah, no, I know. I just always butcher that in my head because I think about it. It's supposed to like the smart tan. Is it supposed to be like the E silent, or is it smarty as in smarty tan? But anyways, it's smart. I like smarty tan. I guess a little bit better. Anyway, so it says, he says, follow the breadcrumbs, God, commandments, yourself, God, churches, church. Oh, sorry, his comment moved up a little bit. 1 second. Churches that don't follow this have to go. And churches that don't follow that are leading souls astray. I wholeheartedly believe that, and it breaks my heart. So I think we certainly need to bring attention to that. Vinny said LGB and straight are romantic orientations. The TQIA is liberalism. I'm going to go further and just say it's mental illness, straight up. Now, I'm not going to call liberalism straight up a mental illness, and here's why. Leftism, I will. And if you don't believe me, talk to a leftist and ask them if they're a liberal. They will consider liberals to be pretty much conservatives, because if we look back, and this is just historical fact, if we look back at a lot of the conservatives, especially our conservative founding fathers, in comparison to the men that came before them and the cultures that came before them, they were liberal, right? And the idea of freedom of speech was a liberal idea, is a liberal idea at the end of the day in that context, right? Compared to where they came from. The idea of a nation with true freedom of religion is a liberal idea compared to where our founding fathers came from. The Second Amendment. So this is the one thing I always try to keep in my mind is I try not to use liberal so much. I am a conservative, but I acknowledge, to me, I actually do see a purpose for the balance in liberal and conservatism and liberalism and conservatism. I believe that it is part of our conservative nature that leads us to respect the past and to ask many questions and to debate it before we throw away tradition, before we give up on a tradition. It is the conservatism in us that tells us, right, to respect that past and to continue the good traditions, the traditions that aren't harmful, in regard, in different ways. Of course, I'm not speaking to any specific tradition. I'm just saying that it's the conservatism in us that tells us to wait a minute before acting, before we change something. Now, it's the liberalism in us that sees something and says, we need to change this, because just because something has been tradition doesn't mean that it's right. For example, slavery has been a worldwide since the beginning of man tradition, right? That certainly doesn't make it right. So that's how I think of liberal and conservative. I think of personally them existing in me both, even though I am more conservative. I do still have both those aspects in me. And sorry for that tangent. It's just, Vinny, you touched on a topic that I love talking about. But actually, before I move on, Chris, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I not really. I mean, I get it. I mean, I was in a situation tonight where I had to talk about my district that I'm running for, and it's a very purple district. And, I mean, I kind of was sort of picking from some of the liberal stuff and some of the conservative stuff and trying to find a way to kind of mesh them together, you know. Because I mean, I think that especially if you're a conservative running in that type of district, you're going to want to be as open-minded as possible. But as they say, you don't want to be so open-minded that your brain falls out.
One of my favorites. And that really is and to one more quick reference to that liberal and conservatism is where I what's the oh God, what's the story of the liberal and conservative? They're walking through a field, I believe, and they see a fence. The liberal says, let's tear it down. It's in our way. The conservative says, no, but first let's ask why that fence is there before we remove it. And I know I'm summarizing it, but I generally do believe that. But like I said, I know that kind of leans against liberalism there. But I do believe that liberalism serves a purpose in us and in our culture as well. So once again, Smartyton says, follow the breadcrumbs, God commandments, yourself, God. No one is above the law except for your God. Now, it also depends, though. Now, be careful what you do in the name of God, right? We have a long history of people doing some truly evil stuff in the name of God because they specifically say that God is above the law of man, but where, that's where they've twisted it and inserted their own ideology and hatred so much. Vinny, this is slightly off topic, but it's still an interesting question. If time is considered a dimension, not spatial, would that make God four-dimensional? That is a conversation for a whole different type of stream right there. I do
Oh my
want to
God,
think
that
of
is so funny.
yeah, I do think of Andrew Klavan a little bit because Andrew Klavan, he is of the Daily Wire, but he's my favorite. I mean, Andrew Klavan is the out there old man that I hope to be someday. I just love Andrew Klavan. Most people who watch the Daily Wire, they're familiar with Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and Matt Walsh, but many are not familiar with Andrew Klavan. Trust me, look him up. He's amazing. Anyways, he actually kind of thinks of God as existing in eternity, and he doesn't think of eternity as this road that just keeps going. He actually thinks of eternity as all existing at once. That way, for example, when we pass away, we will already see everyone we love in the beyond, because since the beyond is, since heaven is eternity, the people who when we died hadn't died yet, they're already dead and they're already up there. So he thinks he actually has some really amazing conversations about his views, and I think he's pretty cool, so check him out.
I will definitely say to Vinny, if you're kind of like interested in some of this philosophical stuff, and not so much from like a religious standpoint, because this the guy that I'm going to recommend to you is actually an atheist, so he's definitely not religious, but he talks about some really interesting stuff, and that's Michael Shermer. Um, I think he has a podcast. Just look up Michael Shermer on like say Apple Podcasts or something like that, and you'll find him. I listen to him all the time. Obviously, I'm not an atheist, but I do appreciate the stuff that he has to say, and it's very thought provoking. It kind of makes you think about these things.
No, absolutely. And that is one thing, like I said, while I'm not big on getting out there and right at this point in my life, at least, right, in my journey with Christ, with God, I'm not at a point where I'm out there speaking to them, speaking to others about it, or in any kind of great detail. But I am open to conversations, and I always stress that. And even when people talk about debating topics, I actually prefer to now say I'm having a conversation, even if it does get heated, because I find that just makes for a better environment. I'm not really debating because I know where I stand. I am listening, yes, and I am considering, but I also know where my heart lies, and my heart lies with God. And also on, like, for example, an issue of abortion, I know where I stand firmly. So when I talk with someone about abortion, especially someone who's on the very opposite side, they're so pro-abortion, like there's no limits or anything like that. I'm not having a debate with them, because in my heart, and especially in my faith, there's no debate to be had. It's a human life, right? I'm having a conversation with them about our differences, our different perspectives, but I'm not debating them. So I like to differentiate between those two things: a debate and a conversation. I just feel a conversation, even if it's heated, is more productive than a debate. But
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense, man.
But yeah, I do want. Vinny also says, by the way, vote Chris for office 2025. Although it actually is going to be in 2026. Correct? It's November
That is
2026.
correct.
He just declared very early. It's I feel like a lot of people have done that. Funny enough, following Trump, right? Trump was like, I'm running. Although I think Trump declared that when he was a child, so I think he's pretty much ahead of everyone. But
Well, the idea is, Vinny, is that what you do is you declare really early, and that scares away any potential primary candidates that you might have to go up against. And I am fortunate enough that my local Republican Party is actually supporting me. So hopefully that's not something that's going to happen. If it does, fine, whatever, it is the political process. But yeah, we're hoping to avoid a primary situation in my district. So, but I still thank you so much for your support.
So Chris, since we are almost at an hour and 20 minutes, and I want to get into this, take into consideration all we watched tonight, right? And taking into consideration your journey now as a Jewish man. How when you take both of those into consideration and put them side by side, what we saw tonight, especially the Jewish clips, what is your inner feeling? Like how does that make you feel? Like if either of those rabbis were before you, I mean, what does that bring up in you as you're on your journey, especially?
Yeah, it brings up hmm, a little bit of rage, I guess, to a certain degree, and anger, because I think that they're really misrepresenting the word of God. It's like I was saying beforehand. It's like on the issue of homosexuality, we can have some differences over interpretation and exactly what that meant. As far as, like, especially the stuff in Leviticus and going forward even to the New Testament and Romans. Um, we can have some disagreement about that, but the stuff that they're bringing up, especially, and I was just as appalled as you about that woman who was talking about Jesus coming in drag, or
Or a
Jesus
trans man, just
or Jesus being a trans man, or non-binary,
mhm.
or getting up there before the crowd and shaking and trembling because he was evidently so nervous to do something. It's like, it's like, where do you even get any of this shit from the Bible? I mean, yeah, we might have some disagreements over homosexuality as, like, intellectually honest people. But where the hell do you get this shit? This, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just don't understand it. It's like
Yeah.
they're twisting the Bible into something that it's not.
Yeah.
They're twisting Christianity and Judaism into things that they're not, and it's all for, really, honestly, when it gets down to it, political gains. And as a politician myself, I'm going to say that's disgusting. I mean, to take religion and twist it to suit your political
Mm.
goals is kind of gross.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something that I would ever do. And we know that lots of politicians have done that. We know that on the right and the left. But, the left loves to point out when right-leaning politicians do that sort of thing. But here, here they are, the left, doing the exact same thing, and they're going to be fine with it. Give me a break.
Yeah. It, it's for me. I guess there's several levels as I listen to these so-called Christians and what they're doing. So on my end of that spectrum, Chris, is because yes, I am a homosexual man. I have committed my life, my heart, at least in the earthly sense, my heart to a romantic partner who is a man. And the love I have for him is just so great. And he actually, ironically enough, learning to who I was before I met this man was a very different person. I was a little bit more of the stereotype in the club scene and all that stuff when it came to the gay culture and stuff. And meeting this man has actually, funny enough, led me to want a closer relationship with with Jesus. Sorry, I want to say Jesus and God at the same time. With Jesus Christ, with our Lord, and a large part of that path has been loving this man, has been wanting to be faithful to this man, has been wanting to honor everything I have with this man, the commitment that I have made. But that aside, as I walk this path with with God guiding me, I walk this path first and foremost as a child of God. I don't really think of myself as walking this path as a homosexual with God. I think of walking as a child of God. And if there's a greater conversation to be had about the fact that I'm a homosexual man, that will be had with God. It won't be had with my neighbor, per se. And I guess that's where I leave that at the end of the day. Now, I'm not telling my neighbor that they have to read the Bible a certain way or they have to accept me and my husband. I'm not telling them that they have to do any of that. What I am saying to them is that I am having my own relationship with God. And just as I respect your relationship with God, please respect mine. Because remember, only God knows my heart and only God can judge that heart at the end of the day. You can make statements about my actions and my behaviors. That's true, because that's in the realm of man. But when it comes to what's in my heart, when it comes to the content of my soul, only God will ever judge that. And that's how I feel about at the end of the day when it comes to being a homosexual man who's seeking a relationship with God and Jesus Christ. And that's why I'm repelled by what I see here. These individuals are not walking with God. First of all, they're not walking with God at all. They think they are, but they're not even doing it as just children of God. They're doing it as all these other identities and then trying to worship those identities and literally put those identities on an altar. And that's why I have such disdain for what I'm saying. But even then, I can't fully judge them because once again, God only knows what's in their hearts and God can only truly lead them. And I pray that God leads them away from this insanity. I full-heartedly pray for that. It just breaks my heart, and that is mostly why I'm upset. I'm not upset, as like I said, judging them because God would do that. I'm upset because I'm seeing souls be led down a path that is just a path to darkness and loneliness. And that saddens me. It angers me. But most of all, when I watch these clips, I'm actually quite sad. But
Yeah. Yeah, same here, man. Same here. Um, the only thing that I can say is that, you know, what they're trying to do is ultimately politicize religion, you know. And I really do think that that's what they're trying to do. And they get very upset when the right does it because the right has done it for sure. Um, but they get very upset about that. But then when they turn around and do it, it's somehow a noble cause, you know. So,
Mhm.
um,
Exactly.
but
I,
yeah, man, it's like
I
a queer path to God. I
yeah,
don't really think there is a queer path to God. I really
no,
don't think there is.
there isn't a queer path to God at all.
Mm.
Absolutely not. And I think we've discussed this pretty thoroughly tonight. I think there's many conversations to be had, but I think we've discussed, at least in regards to what we wanted to do, I think we discussed it very thoroughly tonight. Do you have any final thoughts, Chris?
No, no. God bless you all. Thank you so much for following us over to our new channel and
Yeah.
everything. Really appreciate that. We're gonna keep trying to expand things out. We're in the process of going through the approval process to get the show on Apple Podcasts, like I was talking about earlier. So that'll be another way to listen, or at least consume our content. I think it will be audio only through Apple Podcasts, but that's fine because we'll once we get that approved, we'll take that into account and try to make the show a little bit more audio friendly.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, I think I'm good, Kevin,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah, it was good to see you, man.
absolutely. And I guess the final thing I want to say is, people, if you're following God, make sure you're following God. If you're following God in the sense of you're a Christian, make sure you're following Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. You're not following a flag. You're not following an identity. You're not following a gender identity, a sexual orientation, a trans ideology, a skin color. You're not following any of that. You are following God. You're following Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, from the Christian perspective. So I guess that God bless everyone. That's where I want to lead that. And love to y'all. Bless y'all. Have a good night. And we'll catch you next time. By the way, we're doing a Mother's Day stream, so be sure to catch that. All right. Have a good one.